Future Voices Council and a board member of Personal PAC. We're excited to introduce you to Jane's Army, a new campaign from Personal PAC, Men for Choice, and Future Voices Council to recruit volunteers, educate, motivate, and activate voters ahead of the critical 2022 election. You'll get to hear more about the campaign and why it's so important in just a bit, but first I wanted to introduce you to some of our special guests from tonight. From Jane's Army, we have Chloe Sachs, Orrin Jacobson, and Grace Barter. Our special guests tonight are Illinois State Representative Kelly Cassidy, Heather Booth, and Andy Friedman. Thank you all for taking some time tonight to help us understand what we're up against and how we can fight back. With that, let's get started. I'll pass it over to Orrin to give us a quick overview of the issues.
Thank you, Hannah, and good evening, everybody. My name is Orrin Jacobson. I'm the co-founder and co-executive director of Men for Choice. It's lovely to be with you tonight. Over the last 40 years, the radical anti-choice movement has pursued a single goal: to overturn Roe v. Wade and ban abortion in every state, including in Illinois. And now, unfortunately, they finally have the Supreme Court they need to make that happen, and they are not wasting any time. Despite the constitutional guarantee to an abortion, this radical court is allowing a near total abortion ban to go into effect in Texas. In most states in America, Roe v. Wade is effectively non-existent, with access to abortion almost totally unavailable. In the Illinois Supreme Court, anti-choice extremists are just one seat away from controlling the 7-member court in the same way they now control the United States Supreme Court. If we allow them to gain the majority in the 2022 elections in Illinois, they could immediately erase all the protections and the rights that advocates like you have worked so hard to ensure. And we too will be living in a world without Roe. Since Illinois is the only state in the Midwest with laws that explicitly protect abortion, people between the two coasts will have no place to turn for their reproductive health care if we do not succeed in Illinois in the 2022 elections. This election will have consequences for the next 50 years and has unleashed anti-choice challengers for governor, the Illinois General Assembly, and the Illinois Supreme Court. Every single seat across the state is up for election in 2022. This is all because every 10 years, we go through a redistricting process. And so everybody will be running up and down the ballot. And we have 2 Illinois Supreme Court races, which will either threaten or affirm all of the progress that the pro-choice movement has made over the past few decades. And the 2022 election in Illinois will determine the fate of legal abortion in the post-Roe era for generations to come. We cannot emphasize how profoundly important this particular election will be for the future of reproductive freedom in the Midwest, which is why we're excited to have you here tonight, because your participation is essential for us to fight these tactics and ensure victories where they will make a difference. In other words, the best thing that all of us can do to fight back against the anti-abortion movement seeking to overturn Roe v. Wade is to first and foremost take care of our own backyard. And with that, I'll pass it back to Grace to introduce you to our next speaker.
Great. Thank you, Orrin. Thanks for that context. It's helpful and a very good reminder. So now I am very excited to introduce State Representative Kelly Cassidy tonight. Representative Cassidy is joining us from the 14th House District and is one of our strongest pro-choice champions advocating for reproductive freedom, among many other progressive issues in Springfield since 2011. She was the sponsor of the historic Reproductive Health Act of 2019, and she joins us tonight to give us a brief update on the status of choice in Illinois and the importance of the upcoming November midterms for our state. So I'll pass it over to you, Representative.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me and inviting me to be part of this. I want to start by saying, about an hour ago, I started wondering, what does one wear to launch an army? Figuring out what I should, how I should dress for this. And I'm going to tilt down so you can see, because what one wears to launch an army is something that will piss off your enemies. And this is my Instigators of Moral Mayhem shirt, which is a logo for my political organization that we made after the Illinois Family Institute gave me that nickname. They about every year or so come out with a really good quote that gets turned into a favorite thing rather than the insult they think they're hurling at me. You know, the reality is, you know, fundamentally elections matter so much, and it sounds trite. It sounds, frankly, not very sexy. But I will start with, you know, the summer of 2019, as we were getting together almost weekly to pass progressive legislation with our then new governor, J.B. Pritzker. I lost count of how many times I said what a difference a governor makes. I passed bills that the previous governor had vetoed. You know, we passed a lot of amazing things in that year with a lot of pent up momentum. So, you know, we cannot underestimate that. And to be perfectly honest with you, without the success that we had in the 2018 elections, the Reproductive Health Act would not have happened, period. There were so many moderate members of my caucus who didn't want to take the vote, who didn't feel like that you know, we were really under the threat that we are. You know, the accusations of hysteria got really old. But the new women that we elected that year from the suburbs and had flipped seats left, right, and sideways to grow us from a majority to a super duper majority, they're the reason that this bill got moved. They all had the wherewithal to go to then Speaker Madigan and threaten to shut it all down because they had campaigned promising to protect reproductive health. There was even one member who got up in caucus and said, if I go home for this vote, it's why I ran for this office in the first place. So the difference that election made and the next election where we held on to most of those seats is it cannot be overemphasized. You know, the reality of what we were up against, the number of times I was sure that the RHA was dead was it's depressing to think back on, to be honest with you. But you know, the strength and power of those first term, mostly women, who were not going to be deterred was amazing. So, and that's a twofer, right? That's because we flipped seats that hadn't been part of the Democratic caucus before, but also because we sent people who were mission focused and unapologetic in their pro-choice positions. So hugely important that we get behind the folks that will take those stands. And speaking of that, we're in the middle of it right now. You know, people are, Oren shared that everyone is up for re-election this year because of the new map. So we're running in new territory. And folks are right now out on the streets getting signatures to get on the ballot. And we can have a different conversation at a different time about my belief in better small d democracy in our election laws. But right now, people are trying to get on the ballot. So if you're walking to the train, if you're heading to the grocery store, be kind and sign. You know, the democracy depends on people taking that leap and running for office. You know, and Oren, I'm glad you mentioned the state Supreme Court. This is the first time it's been remapped in decades. And so it's a whole new ball game on these races. And we cannot afford to lose a seat. We simply cannot afford to lose these seats. The number of times I've had a bill pass where I knew there was a challenge coming for it, but felt comfortable and felt safe. That's a feeling I wish every legislator could have. But as we head into this next election cycle with our state Supreme Court, and it's the sleeper race, man, people don't even realize that we elect these folks. So everything that we can do to elevate the importance of that race is critical to all of us. All of the pro-choice votes are up for re-election. So while I have my own race and I don't yet know if I have an opponent, I know that my sisters in the suburbs are going to need my help and all of our help to hold on to these seats. So every tool we have, including Jane's Army, is going to be needed to get us over the finish line in November. looking at the governor's race, we feel confident and everybody loves Governor Pritzker, but the truth is there's a wild primary happening on the Republican side where they're just setting fire to piles of money to try to take him out. And when I look at Ken Griffin's slate and look at the person that I debated for 3 hours on the Reproductive Health Act as the lieutenant governor candidate on that slate, I know what they're aiming for. I know what they're coming for. They're coming for my uterus, but they're also coming for my family. They're coming for my marriage. They're coming for the way I got pregnant. They're coming for me. They're coming for us. And we cannot let that happen.
Thank you, Representative. That's incredibly powerful. And as always, we're so grateful for your time and for your leadership. We couldn't do what we do without you. So next up, we have Andy Friedman. Andy is an amazing Personal PAC board member and an expert in advocacy and policy regarding reproductive health and abortion access. So Andy, thanks so much for joining us to give us a brief snapshot of the national landscape and what we should be expecting when it comes to the US Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade. So I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks so much, Grace. It's always an honor to be here on a Personal PAC event, and certainly sandwiched between my own rep and the inimitable Heather Booth, a legend in this work. It's a pretty great honor to get to be here. And I just want to give a huge thanks to you, Grace, and also Chloe and Hannah for the work that you're doing to create this. This is just the right thing we need at this moment, this kind of organizing. It's really invigorating for me to be on a call like this, to be talking about how we're building power in Illinois. So as I give some of the darker information, this is the kind of event that really gives me hope in the power that we're building and what we all can do to make a difference here. So as Oren said, things are pretty rough around the country and have been for a while. Many states have long been in a quote unquote post-Roe environment with maybe one clinic with people driving hundreds of miles and jumping through hoops to get abortion care. The Supreme Court, I assume everyone has heard, Jackson Women's Health, the case with the Mississippi 15-week ban. The oral arguments were as bad or worse as we could have imagined. The arguments that the justices were making and what they were saying made it very clear that at the least we do not have 5 votes to strike down that law. And at the very worst, they will be overturning Roe v. Wade this summer. I would say if they don't this summer, it's just a matter of time. What they would do is just decimate it even further and let the lower courts do their thing until they have an excuse to overturn it fully. But it is not looking good for the situation in Mississippi and nationally around Roe v. Wade. And as Oren mentioned, the signs are all there when you look at Texas. It has been over 5 months that we have a state that has virtually banned abortion, and the Supreme Court has kicked the can. They've basically gotten together with the Fifth Circuit, which is worse than the Supreme Court in terms of a totally politicized, conservative loaded body. And in fact, in oral arguments in the Fifth Circuit, when they were asked to put this law on hold, this blatantly unconstitutional law on hold, one of the judges said, why don't we just hold off and wait until the Supreme Court overturns Roe, and then we won't have to decide this. He literally said that. So the writing is pretty much on the wall. And meanwhile, the women in Texas are not getting access to abortion. We're seeing them here in Illinois. We've heard from providers here that within days they were getting patients coming from Texas. So basically, the takeaway is that our legal system is broken and politicized, but as we've known for a very long time here at Personal PAC and what Personal PAC's been doing for 30 years, it's about political power and building that power and engaging the grassroots and engaging all of you. And that's what we're doing here tonight. And that's how we are going to win these state Supreme Court cases. That's how we're going to hold the line in this 2022 in this critical election and build our majority here in Illinois and continue to be the haven that we are now and will really need to be after this summer as people travel from around the country to Illinois, and we're able to welcome them here and get them the abortion access they need while we work around the country to turn back this tide, because the fight is long, but we are going to win it. As we've heard many times, the arc of history, right? And it is all of our job to get out there and see that the new reality that we're about to be living in never is allowed to become the new normal, that we always see it as the human rights violation that it is, and a state that has to be temporary as we build back and get access for everyone around the country to the abortion care that they need and want and deserve. So as I said, it's going to be a long fight, and there are a lot of laws currently pending, a lot of states chomping at the bit to ban abortion. We'll fight them where we can, and we'll build power where we can't until we can. So thank you all for being here. Happy to talk more about any of the many other things. I could go on for another half hour, but I won't. I want to leave time for the phenomenal Heather Booth. So I'll send it back to you, Grace.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. Thanks for your insight. You turned a hard, dark thing into somehow energizing. So thanks for that. So now we have Heather Booth joining us. Heather is a civil rights activist, feminist, and political strategist who founded Chicago's Jane Collective. The Jane Collective was an underground Chicago-based org run by a group of women who put themselves at risk to help others obtain abortion from 1969 until abortion became legal in 1973. So welcome, Heather, and thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor.
It is truly my pleasure to be here with you. So thank you, Grace. And you and your whole team, Chloe and Hannah and Oren, you are such dynamic leaders. And you're exactly the leaders that we need for the future and the struggles ahead, the next generation. And it's also wonderful that you build on the work of Terry Cosgrove, who said we should not, it's one of the rare times I'm not following his direction. He said we should not mention him, but you build on that work and carry it forward. So those from the seniors and the yelders, the young elders is what we call it, combining for the future. And Andy, your comments were cautionary and inspiring. And Representative Cassidy, I was so glad when you just described how we had partnered in National Organization for Women in the 1970s, and that struggle continues. But who the heck thought we would still be struggling like this? But when we organize, we have changed this world. And if we organize now, we will change this world for the better. And the people I most want to thank, though, are all of those listening in and whose names are in the chat. I feel like I could spend all my time just mentioning the remarkable people who've listed. We've been partners for so many years for so many of you. Many of you are long distance runners. You've been in this for years. Many are just coming into it now, but whatever the length of time, you are the people that we need to shape the future. One funny thing about, or ironic thing about this moment of this conversation is I just come off of a week at the Sundance Film Festival, which this year was held virtually, with 2 films about the Jane Collective, the underground abortion service that Grace just described. There are 2 new films that were shown at Sundance. You may not have heard about them yet, but you will soon, and they'll be a great resource. One is called The Janes, and it's a Hollywood fictional version of the basic story that is going to gain wonderful attention because it stars Sigourney Weaver, who is a combination of me and another wonderful woman many people knew, Jodie Parsons, who's died, and Ruth Sergel, who were the kind of leaders of a key part of this Jane Underground, and also Elizabeth Banks. And there's also a documentary that's an HBO supported, so it will get high visibility, that tells the true story. And many of you are going to see friends of yours from Chicago in that story. I'll tell you briefly how I got involved. I had been in the civil rights movement and learned from the civil rights movement that even when things look most hopeless, if we organize, we can change this world. And we did. I also learned sometimes you have to stand up to illegitimate authority, and you always have to do what you know is morally right. A friend of mine told me his sister was pregnant and nearly suicidal. In 1965, I had actually never thought about the issue of abortion that I recall, and maybe it's that it was a more innocent time, maybe I was a more innocent person. I found a doctor through the medical arm of the civil rights movement, Dr. T.R.M. Howard, who had been a remarkable civil rights leader in Mississippi and came to Chicago when his name appeared on a Klan death list. He had a clinic for women on 63rd Street called Friendship Clinic. And he performed the abortion. I thought that was a one-time thing. I did it as a moral act of a good deed for a friend. But word spread, someone else called. That procedure was successful, and then someone else called. I realized we needed to set up a system. Dr. Howard explained to me everything that was involved. We negotiated on the price. We negotiated on what was involved in it. And we set up a broader system that, as Grace just said, over time, the women of Jane, we call the system Jane, the women of Jane learned how to do the procedures, and they themselves performed 11,000 abortions. We know that the question of women's reproductive choice is popular in the American public. It is overwhelmingly supported by across every race, region, religion, age, geography of the population. We also know that it is not rare. Right now, 1 in 4 people of reproductive age will have an abortion. 4. So 1 in 4. So that's, we do Hannah, Chloe, Representative Cassidy, and me. So one of us is likely to have had or will have an abortion. You go through any 4, it means it needs to be safe and accessible and legal. And your efforts are especially needed now. And so that was from Jane, the Abortion Underground. And now you are Jane's army carrying this forward. And it especially matters now because right now, much of the population and much even of our movement, maybe even many of ourselves, are dispirited, demoralized, wondering how can we win? A lot is battering us. It's COVID. It's certainly the forced pregnancy agenda coming from the Supreme Court, the vigilante bounty system in Texas. Even worse than that, it's just a 6 weeks notice. You now could get $10,000 for reporting on a neighbor that 3 people are considering organizing for someone to support a woman in the most personal decision of our lives, when or whether to have a child or how many children we might want to have. And we know that this is disproportionately impacting poor women, Black and brown women, communities of color, and those who have the fewest resources in the society. But there is an ability to fight back. Right now, there is a beautiful movement in the country. The scale of our movement is greater than it's ever been. It's more intersectional, multifaceted, and it's all over. We've won victory against the odds. We won, can you remember just a year ago when people thought Trump might be president? It's hard to remember back then. We won a president, a House, and a Senate by small margins, not enough, we need even more. But we won that. In DC, people were literally dancing in the street the day after the election. And we've won major investments in jobs with an economic recovery, with wages increasing, with declining unemployment. We still may win even greater investments with this Build Back Better, with childcare, universal pre-K, lower drug prices, making the wealthiest pay their fair share. All of this is possible, but only when we organize. And you've made Illinois a haven in the Midwest with the most supportive laws for women's reproductive freedom, and probably, and certainly in the Midwest, and one of the best in the whole country. And with the 2022 elections coming up, and this race for the justice, to get a justice who actually knows what justice is, will be a fight worth everything we have. But when we've organized, we have changed this world. And when you organize, you will change this world. So I thank you for everything you've done. And I hope to celebrate all our victories together in the future. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for being a movement partner for so many years. On to the victory for the people of Illinois and for the country. Thank you all.
Thank you, Heather. Look at those claps you're getting. Thank you so much. Like I said, it's an honor to have you here. So to transition a bit, next up we have Chloe from Jane's Army. So I'll hand it over to you, Chloe.
Well, I have the impossible act of following Heather Booth. Although I have to say it's a super special moment because one of the first events that I participated in with Personal Pack was this intergenerational panel with Heather. And that was the first time I had a chance to meet Heather. And now here we are. And I'm so proud that we are starting Jane's Army and that we have that tie to the Jane Collective and something that is inspired by you, since we are all so inspired by you. And it makes me a tiny bit emotional, but now I'm going to get down to business. So I am Chloe Sachs. I am a member of the board of Personal Pack. I am a co-chair along with Hannah Fearley of the Future Voices Council and now of Jane's Army. So what is Jane's Army? I know we've been talking about it and getting really excited about it. Basically, we're building an army of partner organizations, of volunteers and activists to educate and motivate and work towards getting as many pro-choice candidates elected in Illinois as possible, and also to fighting the anti-choice extremist agenda in 2022 and of course beyond 2022. And so basically what we're trying to do, and it's kind of information, so I'm so excited to have so many people who are here because we really want this to feel like a community and we want everyone to have a voice in everything that it is we choose to talk about and the ways in which we choose to act. But the goal overall is to take our pro-choice message to the doors of Illinois, to the streets of Illinois, to the phones of voters across Illinois. And importantly, there will be something for everyone. So for those folks who are comfortable, I'm seeing Kim's message in the chat. For those folks who aren't located in Illinois, we'll still have plenty of opportunities for you to get involved in things like text banking and phone banking. And for those who are, we'll have in-person opportunities based on your comfort level. Just really, really excited to have everyone on board. Personal Pack and Men for Choice and by osmosis, we have a proven winning strategy. And so we want you to join us in strategic campaigns across Illinois to hold anti-choice candidates accountable for their agenda, and of course to support pro-choice candidates. So a couple asks. First of all, now we get to, okay, what do we actually want you to do? First of all, Grace is going to pop a link in the chat. Through that link, you take the pledge to support a pro-choice 2022 and to join Jane's Army. It is a symbolic and exciting act. It is also a great way for us to have your contact information so that we can continue to let you know as opportunities arise. And of course, feel free to reach out to any of us with ideas and to get more involved. That's one of the things that's most exciting about this, is that element of collaboration. So that's the first thing, is go to the chat, stop listening to me and just take the pledge. Second, we could use your help in amplifying our message. So we have an amazing turnout tonight. If each person here could get 5 more people to turn out next time, and then the next time after that, and after that, and after that, we really want to grow exponentially and be able to have as large an impact as possible. So again, people of all ages, all shapes, sizes, types, anyone who's passionate about this, please let them know. And again, try to hit that goal of 5. In the notes that were given to me by the amazing Grace to prep for tonight, she said 3 to 5, but I think like we can do better than 3. And then the final ask before I pass it over to Hannah is, again, we want to know what this group is most interested in learning more about and what you think that those 5 folks who are going to join you for the next event will be most passionate about, will want to learn more about. And so we're actually going to do a poll here in a second. And I will stop talking to give you some time to consider. But these are a few ideas we had around the next event topic. And if everyone wanted to just take a moment to think through what is most interesting, would love to get your responses. And while everyone's responding, and I feel like I just went into like a yoga teacher mode, while everyone's responding, I again, just want to thank everyone for being here. The incredible Grace Barter, who keeps us on task and does not get nearly enough credit, in my opinion. And of course, Representative Cassidy, Andy, Oren, Heather, Terry, everyone else from Personal PAC, who's, I know Eileen is on here, Hannah, of course. It's just so incredibly exciting to see all of these faces, and we hope to see so many more. So with that, I think maybe I've allowed enough time for the poll, and I will pass it back to Hannah.
Thank you, Chloe. Grace, I don't see the poll on screen. Do you happen to know the results?
Due to some tech difficulties, I actually don't either. Does my amazing coworker Liz happen to have the results?
Hello, yes. Edging out, 24 of 67 respondents are most interested in the link between the anti-choice movement, white nationalists, anti-Semites, and anti-LGBTQ groups. Oh, actually, now we have another respondent. So tied with how will the Illinois Supreme Court impact the future of reproductive rights in Illinois and beyond?
All
right. Thank you, Liz. So before we wrap up, we want to share another resource with you. It's called our Top 10 Worst Things About the Anti-Choice Movement. And this is a resource to better understand what the anti-choice movement really stands for and just how serious this threat is. So we already know that anti-choice extremists want to make abortion illegal, but they want to do so much more. So we created this list so that you can see for yourself. Check out the link in the chat. I think, yeah, it should be in the chat now to see the full list. And we hope you'll share this list with those in your network who might be concerned about one or any of these threats. But before we wrap up tonight, we want you to vote for which item you think is the worst of the worst. So a poll is going to pop up on your screen. I see it on mine. And we ask that you select the item that makes you the most outraged to see. Thank you so much, everyone who joined us, our wonderful speakers, Representative Cassidy, my fellow board member, Andy, and the amazing Heather Booth. And I really want to give Grace another shout out because, oh, and Oren, I'm sorry, Oren, I missed you. And Grace, of course, we couldn't do it without her. So thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm gonna quickly share my screen so that people can see the list in case they don't have it handy in front of them. Can everyone see that okay? Getting some nods maybe. I know it's probably small, but if this is helpful for while you're taking the poll. And this is on our website as well, so you can check it out after tonight. Scroll down to the second page. So if everyone wants to take that poll, and then the amazing Liz maybe can announce the results again since it was so riveting last time. She did a great job.
I think I would underscore also the point sort of made by Andy and Heather and others earlier, which is that like these are really pretty horrible when you read through them. It is not a delightful thing to discuss, hear about, experience out in the world. And so I do want to emphasize though that, you know, one of the things that drove me to, I came to Terry at a time where I said, Terry, this is like so horrible. And what do I do? Right. And becoming a part of this organization and joining so many of these people who are like icons to me in this fight has been a real source of hope and empowerment. So I think that's what I would promise you will receive and feel by virtue of joining us and having others join us. So that's my final plug for today, at least.
Yeah, and thank you, Chloe. I'm hoping to open it up for some questions as soon as Liz lets us know how that poll did.
Sure. I think I was able to actually share the results so everybody can see it for themselves.
Oh, got it.
Let me know if that works for everyone. But the top response is that the anti-choice movement claims to be pro-life.
That is a good one. Makes my blood boil just thinking about it. So thanks, Liz. Sorry for the tech issues, everybody. We'll get it better next time. So I want to take a little pause here. We just put a bunch of info out here and we have these incredible speakers for the next 15 minutes or so. So I want to open it up to see if anyone has questions, thoughts. You're welcome to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I can call on you. Thanks, Brian, for being here. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts? Don't be shy. I know the chat was very busy.
I see Dee waving her hand.
Oh, Dee, come on, Dee. Dee, I'm not hearing you. Is anyone else?
Dee, we're not hearing you.
No, it doesn't look like you're muted, but we can't hear you. Okay, maybe
Dee is getting it so we can hear her, and I very much want to hear her. I saw her referred so admiringly in the chat. I'd like to hear her especially, but I wanted to make one additional comment that I didn't quite hear on this call before. And that is that right now we are on a knife's edge in this country, not only on the question of reproductive freedom, but on the question of democracy itself and truly the direction that we go in the country. When there was the January 6th insurrection and an attempt to overthrow a democratically elected government in the United States, even with a memo that some of you may have read about that Trump had penned that said that the military should take control of ballot boxes so that the votes couldn't even be counted by the regular electors. That what's happened is this fight for democracy itself, for whether we have a system by which small d democracy can function at all, as imperfectly as it functions now. That fight has been heavily politicized, largely by the Republican Party, and that it is using the movement that's so-called pro-life. It's using the movement for forced pregnancy, using the movement that is against women's reproductive freedom as part of the way to politicize, energize, and mobilize its own right-wing hateful base. And when you turn against the tools of democracy itself, and people no longer believe that elections will be safe, the only alternative for many is violence. We now see polls that say 1/3 of the Republican Party believes that violence against political leaders is an appropriate way to go. And there was just a poll out today that said it had the percentages that believed that political assassination was an appropriate way to go. So this move, the politicization, which was not there in the 1960s, of this right to life, heavily Republican movement. I mean, I actually came into electoral work truly nonpartisan. I was fighting against the Democratic Party of the original Mayor Daley. But I've seen how it's so politicized now. And so our very lives are at stake. And so my encouragement, my gratitude is for all of you who are engaging this fight, because this fight, as important as it is about the fight for women's reproductive freedom, is also about the fight for the very nature of what we think America is itself. And can we have a so-called more perfect union? Or as Langston Hughes had said, America was never America to me, but we can make America be that America when we organize, and we need to.
Thanks, Heather. I see Oren has his hand raised, and I also want to thank Dee for her question of getting young people involved, which absolutely, that's what we want to do most of.
100%. Anytime, anywhere, I'm there.
All right, Oren.
We recorded this, right? Because I just want like 3-minute clips of Heather Booth to just keep coming into my inbox. So I'm just glad that this is recorded and I can chop that down and play it when I need to hear it. So I actually have a question for you, Representative Cassidy.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I think a lot of people who may not be, hardcore political organizers, elected officials, or candidates, I think struggle with is the idea of asking their friends to do something political. And it feels like this big burden, and you're like asking so much of folks. And one of the things that I've heard, and I'd like you to talk about that, like, is a good reframe, right? Is that lots of people care and they don't know how to help. And you're not burdening somebody, you're giving them the opportunity to take action. And so I want to like talk a little bit about your work as an organizer and how people who aren't as ingrained in this can really be powerful.
Absolutely. And I think the very first piece of this, and I'm guessing Heather would agree as well, is there's so much that for those of us who are steeped in this, who live, breathe, work it every day, so much that we think is just by rote, right? We take for granted what the process is, and we don't really necessarily acknowledge that it can seem obtuse to others. It can seem impenetrable to others. And when you offer someone both an easy path to engage and a safe place to ask questions they think are stupid, but aren't, because most people don't know the answers, they're 9 times out of 10 grateful. And you're pivoting from a burden to an opportunity is a great way to look at it. I remember many years ago when I was first getting started, my ex had agreed to go on a campaign committee, a fundraising committee. And, I came home from work and she said, I agreed to raise X money for, I can't even remember, it was probably for Don Clark Netch or something. And I was like, that's great, but I already have my commitment. So now you got to figure out how to raise $500. And the first thing you should do is tonight when our friend comes over for dinner, ask her for money. Now, this is a friend who had a good job, was philanthropic. And as Alex was talking to Kathy and telling her about this event and everything, and Kathy's nodding like she's on the hook, man, just real. And I saw Alex start to say $50. I just jumped in and said 500 because that was the commitment. And of course she was happy to. She said, oh, is that all? So, don't presume that the person that you want to engage in your passion project isn't also passionate about it. They might just need that opportunity. They just might need a path in and a way to be like, I didn't think I could do this. How does this work? What does this mean? They need someone who is happy to be their tour guide. So, always take that opportunity and never bid against yourself.
Thank you for that, Representative. All right, does anyone else have any questions? I see some comments in the chat. If anyone wants to just unmute and hop on, we've got a couple more minutes. You're welcome to.
Add something else to what Kelly said. I don't want to take any time from anyone who wants to ask a question, but so much we could discuss on it. First of all, I thought your answer was fabulous. Often we say, well, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I know it's a lot of money. I don't want to impose. We need $500. Now, if you can do 1,000, that would really be,
right.
So to function with confidence, we are confident about this movement. We're giving people an opportunity. So you are, boy, am I glad I'm your partner. I wanted
absolutely to your point there, Heather, though, like people sometimes are like, I'm flattered you think I can do that. You're also, if you lowball somebody, does that mean you think they're a cheapskate? You're praising them.
I wanted to give a suggestion, and that is just a tool that I found useful in some efforts. And that is to ask people to write out a little personal strategic plan, in addition to an overall organizational strategic plan that can be modeled. And there are 4 M's that I often think are worth thinking about, with a specific goal in mind. In fact, you might do it tonight, or you might have a form at your next conversation. The 4 M's. Message. What will you do to promote the message? How many tweets? How many letters to the editor? Will you get on talk radio? Are you going to make a speech? How will you spread the message? It means people need to be given talking points. I actually went on 2 briefing calls because I didn't have talking points about how do we currently, there are ways that people think it's more effective to talk about it as reproductive freedom, just as one example, the most intimate decision in a person's life about when or whether or how many children to have is, I'm told by one of the pollsters, it's a good way to talk about it. So message. The second is, and what will you do? What's your plan? Members. How many people will you recruit? What are their names? 5 people. Who are they? Are there any people you have, you can do a match of your voter file list and see if people, or a match of names people give you, are they registered? Are they unregistered? Most of us are registered. Most of us are consistent voters. But are they not so sure they want to even vote because they're so frustrated? Will you be in touch with them regularly through the election? So members by specific names. The third is money. How much money will you raise? Maybe it's $5, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 5,000. But whatever it is, what's your goal? Have you met it? Can you exceed it? And then movement. Will you show up when we ask you to show up? At the demonstrations, at the Twitter storms, at the days of activity. Anyway, just one organizing technique to suggest.
Thank you. I'm taking notes.
I said I wasn't going to talk today, but Heather, thank you. And I have found that people like to be asked to help. And I think that's really important, that we should not be shy about asking for what we want and what we need. And the worst thing anyone can say is no, and they rarely do. And you just bargain from there. So thank you very much, Heather, for saying, Kelly, what you brought up is really important. This is no time to be shy about what we need and what we need to accomplish. So I encourage everyone to take Heather's advice and let's step up there and get it done. Thank you.
And I was just repeating what Kelly had said.
Oh, this is Eileen. I was going to jump in for a second, if that's okay. I, like Representative Cassidy, I have been knocking a lot of doors in the last couple of weeks, and I'll tell you, people are highly motivated about this issue. So the good news, the bad news is they're highly motivated because it's risky. The good news is they really are motivated. And what that means is the more people that Jane's Army can get on the ground at the doors, this could make significant difference. And there are going to be some tough races. I just saw Tara Costa Howard is having, an opponent, and she's going to need to be reelected. So I think the more you can spread this to people, the people at the door just need to know about this issue.
Absolutely. And Tara Costa Howard is one of those people who forced the RHA vote. She is without her allyship, I don't know that I would have survived the last couple of years, to be honest with you. So let's get her back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for that, Eileen. I feel like that's a good segue to a little bit of a recap before we all say goodbye. Yes, let's reelect her. So we have a couple of minutes. I just want to kind of summarize what everyone has already said. Chloe did a great job of what are we actually doing after tonight. So please take the pledge, and I will send this out in an email, so no worries if you don't get it all down tonight. But take the pledge to support a pro-choice 2022. Follow the organizations, Men for Choice, Personal PAC on social media, reshare what you see about Jane's Army. Like Chloe said, aim high, get rid of that 3, go for 5, why not 10 people, to ask them to take the pledge as well. And keep an eye out. We're going to be having more virtual, hopefully in person in the next couple of months as well, more events, both social, educational, all of the above. So keep an eye on our website for those events. And finally, if you're able to make a donation, you can do so to support our work. I won't limit how small or big you can give, as I've just heard, aim high. So that is kind of it for tonight. I see someone just raised their hand. Bev, do you want to hop in real quick before we?
Yeah, I just have a question. Will you be sharing the link to the recording so we can pass that on to people?
Yes, I can send out a link to the recording and all of the other resources we've mentioned tonight so that you can have it all in one place.
Great program. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. I think with that we can say goodbye. Thank you to all the speakers for being here tonight, and for all of you for sitting on the screen for another hour. I'm sure you did it all day. So thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.